Hi everyone, I'm Samantha. Welcome back. This will be our late May 2022 garden tour. I am so excited for you guys to join us today. I hope you're having a wonderful day. So I am standing in the middle of our brand new no-dig border, and it's a work in progress. There's a lot that still needs to be done, but the basic mechanics of it are done and ready to be planted. I am just beginning to plant up a hedgerow along our road of lilacs. I'm going to be adding in some spirea soon. I have a shogetsu flowering cherry tree in here, a Kern's pink viburnum, roses. There's a lot here already, but everything is still very small. So this will be something that unfolds that we will be getting to see more of in the months and years to come. But as we move down to the main garden, we're going to take a peek at all that is blooming in the garden right now. So this is actually the warmest day we've had so far this spring. It was almost 70 degrees today, and up until now, pretty calm. We've had lots of cold weather, late snow. We had a snowy Easter. We've had crazy windstorms. So I feel like this has been the slowest start to spring that we've ever had in this garden, certainly that I've seen in our area in a long time, but things are finally starting to pick up and get going. So to my left, I have my leaning tower of hydrangea. This is a Limelight Hydrangea standard. Still needs some staking. Underneath is a Munstead Wood Rose by David Austin. And then I have a Distant Drums Rose. And all along the driveway, which is just getting going, is my row of Russian sage. Something I've always loved about Monty Don's garden in England is his pathway lined with Camasias and forget-me-nots. Now, Camasias are actually a plant that is native to the Pacific Northwest in the United States where I live. So I love any opportunity that I get to plant something native in my garden because it just feels like an added benefit. And this is a rather boggy area of my garden. It holds a lot of moisture. I've actually amended the soil with loads and loads of sand because it's such heavy clay and is prone to flooding because it's also a low spot. But Camasias as a bulb actually really like wet soil, and unlike other bulbs like tulips or alliums or daffodils, they actually thrive in those types of conditions. They are just coming up and budding up and are going to bloom. These are a beautiful blue Camasia, and they do take about 3 years to really get going. Their first year, they're going to be quite small. Second year, they're going to get better. And then the third year and subsequent years are just going to get better and better. And these are their third year in my garden. So I am looking forward to a gorgeous display this year. And in Monty Don style, I have actually underplanted the Camasias with forget-me-nots. Now, my forget-me-nots, you can kind of see them drifting around everywhere. They started off as 1 or 2 plants that I brought in, and I just let them spread wherever they want to spread. And if they're in somewhere that I don't necessarily want them to be, or I just want to grab a clump and move it, I will. Like this, what I'm planning to do is get some more and spread them because I want them to go thickly down the entire walkway on both sides. But when they go over and they dry, they kind of look ugly and brown. But what I do is I kind of just let them go to seed, shake them up, and then clean them away after I know that they've dropped their seed. And I don't really worry too much about the ugly brown that they leave behind, because usually at that time of the garden, there's so many things growing up that are green around them that you can't really tell. And that's sort of the beauty of a cottage style garden, is that there's always something, different stories and levels of flowers and interest to draw your eye in. Every other space between the Camasias, I also have little lime hydrangeas dotted down the path. I have some honey Dijon, Coco Loco roses, a pink, 3 pink catmint plants, some lavender, and some sanguisorba. And I also have little crocuses and things dotted down the path as well. On this side, I repeated the little lime hydrangeas and then have geranium roseanne dotted down the path. On this side, my plan this fall is to add more camassias to this side of the border so it repeats on both sides. But I also have coming up into bud a coral charm peony. Flanked behind that is a Crocus Rose by David Austin. I have lots of foxgloves that are coming up that have self-sown around the garden, and I kind of had intention of moving some around. But for the most part, I actually really like where all of these foxgloves have placed themselves, albeit some are very close to other perennials. But I'm just gonna kind of let them do what they wanna do and see what kind of display we get from them this year. I have a bush clematis here under this teepee that is growing up and through and getting ready to bloom, hopefully in the next month or so. And I'm not exactly sure what variety it is. I got it from a local Gardeners Club plant sale, and it's a very pretty violet star clematis. Underneath I have a little drift of 5, 6 delphiniums that are 7 actually, delphiniums that are going to be coming up. And I have some irises. I believe this is Beverly Sills. It's a pink iris, and behind that is a beautiful little drift of Charming Beauty tulips. These are a variety that just glow in the garden. I feel like they really show up against my white house, and they look really nice with the Royal Raindrops crabapple in the background, which is just starting to bloom, and I cannot wait. It is loaded up with blossom, but because this has been such a cold, slow spring, it is very, very late to bloom. Now, if you want to follow me along this path, I have also self-sown hollyhocks popping up everywhere. I had a huge row of hollyhocks back here that got up to 14 feet tall, and I ripped them all out, but they're still spreading their little babies everywhere. One of my plans for this spring is to create with you a stone pathway to come back to my hose spigot when I need it, but just to have something safe to walk on, for the kids to know to walk on, to get back here and not trample any plants. But I kind of want it to be this very little magical little trail back here. But just to take a peek, this is my shade corner. I have very little shade in my garden, as it's just in its, it's some areas of my garden will be its 4th season, but only a little bit of it, most of it's 3, 2, or 1 year or brand new. But I have in the back Thalictrum on both sides. There's some Solomon seal back there that are just coming up. All of these beautiful bleeding hearts, which actually I planted from bare roots that I got from Costco actually when we had first built the house, and they have really done well. And there are actually a little patch of forget-me-nots down here that have decided to grow on their own. And I also have some Jack Frost Brennera, a alba or white bleeding heart, more self-sown hollyhocks and larkspur, more Solomon seal, a nice big clump over here of self-sown foxgloves, a big drift of delphiniums all through here, kind of like a river of delphiniums, one of my favorite perennials. And then coming up through here is going to be a late blooming tulip, which is one of my favorites. It's called James Last, and just a stunning parrot variety of tulip. I'll show you more of it down there. We'll show you more in the future as it's in full glory, but it's one that I'm spraying and just praying that the deer don't eat. I have a peony back here. I believe this is Claire de Lune, but I am not 100% sure. I'll have to check I planted it from bare root a few years ago, or no, 2 years ago. So this is the first year I'll really see a nice bloom on it. I do need to stake this though. At one strong windstorm now that it's got a bud, it could snap. And then one of the first shrubs I planted in this garden is this Limelight Hydrangea. And then of course, within my iron support here is my Penelope Rose, which is an older rose that I bought from my daughter, whose name is Penelope Rose. So it just feels fitting to have it by our front door. And this is a cream colored spray, blushy cream colored spray rose, which is just a lovely, pretty rose. And then the Labella Pock tulips and forget-me-nots dancing around underneath. I also have Oriental Poppies, that's the fuzzy leaves coming up that are dotted throughout here as well. And then several Coco Loco roses also in this border, one here to my right and one up next to the path with a lone pink frilly Santander tulip, which is another one of my favorites. I wanted to point out another favorite tulip. It's on the shorter side, but it's Pink Star, and I will get close-ups of it. It looks like very similar coloring to a distant drum rose. I think it's very special. It's a double peony flowered tulip and one that I really, really love. I want to continually add more of it to my garden every year. It has come up again in its second year actually. These were planted last fall, and then over here I have a drift that were planted 2 falls ago. So they have returned, they have rebloomed, and that's a huge bonus with tulips because they don't always come back. So I have, you can kind of see these are further along, they're more blown out than the newer tulips are. They've been blooming longer. And then back behind, those pink fringed tulips that are taller have a beautiful blue throat, and those are the Santander. And all, again, the drifts of forget-me-nots that go around and underneath. And like Monty Don, I also love Tasha Tudor's garden, where she just had what seemed like an ocean of forget-me-nots around her garden. And that's ultimate goals for me, is to have Tasha Tudor level forget-me-nots. So this is one of my favorite tulips that I talked about, called James Last. I've actually had a really hard time finding it this year. I planted these 2 falls ago, and they are this muddy lilac color tulip with all of this buff color mixed in, and they truly are beautiful. They will just get taller and taller and taller as they continue to open up into bloom. They'll probably end up being about this high, and a lovely, stunning variety. They last long in the vase, and one that I hopefully will always have. Now, I've heard that the more parrot tulips tend to be more perennial, and so I hope that that's true. I hope that these will stick around for a long time in my garden. Here's more that I planted last fall that I've drifted around everywhere. I also have a tulip back here that I planted several years ago, which has come back, called Belicia, and it's this gorgeous large flowered cream colored tulip with pink all along the rim of the petals. And I have up by the door my Teasing Georgia climbing rose from David Austin, which is underplanted with loads of daffodils and white delphiniums and campanula, and I have a river of blue paradise phlox that will go through here. I want to try to always have an element of blue in my garden throughout all seasons. So right now it's the forget-me-nots and pansies, and the camassias are coming on, and then it will be the delphiniums and the phlox and the campanula. And blue is one of those most rare colors in the garden. I think it's an incredibly small percentage of flowers are actually blue, and it's one of my favorite colors to have, and I think it's striking against a white house. Now, I have about 4 or 5 coral charm peonies dotted throughout the border, intermixed with this is like my bed of David Austin roses. I have Emily Bronte, I have the Lady Gardener, Jude the Obscure, Carding Mill, Litchfield Angel, Queen of Sweden, Princess Alexandra of Kent. I have a Vanilla Strawberry Hydrangea there and there. So 2 of those in here. And hopefully in June we will have a beautiful display. I also have some Evelyn roses in here, Ambridge. So just loads and loads of David Austins in this bed, which, like I said, I am just praying and hoping for a beautiful rose season this year. If you saw my June garden tour of 2021, I had Dara that had grown up and bloomed all around this bed that had self-sown. And I am happy to report that it is coming up again this year. So it looks like I'm gonna have loads of Dara. I see little baby Cosmos seeds coming up, which I just mulched this border. So I'm hoping that I didn't smother too many of them, that they will still make it. But I have a river of foxgloves that have sown themselves back behind these roses, and I will try to get some shots of this back here so you can see it, but it's going to be quite a dramatic show. I don't even know exactly what colors they're going to end up being, or I am hoping that they'll just be tall, that they'll be tall and that they will rise up just above the roses. So right here, I have my Kwanzan flowering cherry tree, which is looking beautiful and healthy, and this is its 3rd year in the garden, or 2nd. I can't quite remember, but I'm still very, very happy with it, and it's just growing and doing great. So here I have drifts floating through this whole border of yarrow that I started from seed a couple of years ago. This was the summer berries mix from Floret, and yarrow is intense. If you want something to take over a space and cover it quickly, yarrow is your friend, or it can be your foe. I am planning on digging this up. It's literally coming up everywhere. So digging this up and transferring it out to the big border we have just created so it can just go wild. It is gorgeous and beautiful when it blooms, but it can be a little bit thuggish. But I love where it's at right now. If it gets any more aggressive, I'm gonna have to really start taking it out and moving it to other places in the garden. Up along the house, at that corner, I have a Crown Princess Margarita climbing rose from David Austin, which is in need of a pillar, and some Tasha Tudor hollyhocks that are a single creamy white color hollyhock in the back. I have some Princess Charlene de Monaco roses, 2 of those, as well as a little trio of Honey Dijon roses. They are in, I've noticed that this winter, all of my roses on my south side of my garden that are in the direct wind. So we get primarily wind from the southwest, and all of those icy windstorms have done a lot of damage to my roses. This year we had an incredibly cold winter with lots of sustained temperatures below, I think 8 below 0 degrees Fahrenheit, and it was a lot for some of these more tender roses. So in the back of the border I have a mock orange shrub, and I've had it here for about 2 or 3 years now, and it has not ever bloomed for me. Now, it gets hit really hard by the deer towards the end of the summer, and it's supposed to be deer resistant, but in the last 2 summers they have stripped all the leaves and left bare branches, and I know that's probably affecting its bloom. However, I've also been told by the local nurseries that mock oranges can take many years to start blooming, but I hope one of these years soon I will get to see it bloom and smell its beautiful blossoms, and it will bloom forevermore after that. And then down below here I have a drift of different irises, many of which are from Shriners. I know this one is a variety called Las Vegas, but I will be doing another tour with you of the irises when they're all in bloom, because I've added a lot over the last year, and they're finally really thickening up and doing well. I also have some Sweet Rocket, which I started from seed, which is just budding up and starting to bloom, and that's a gorgeous half-hardy annual that kind of sticks around and then reseeds itself. I've got some little babies I see popping up. I also have more of the Dara coming up through here. And this is a Gertrude Jekyll climbing rose from David Austin. This tulip, it's the first year I've ever seen it bloom, and my goodness, it is perennial for me, at least for the last few years. I never saw it bloom because when I planted it 3 years ago, the deer always ate it before I could see it bloom. So there was a few more, but the deer did eat those. But I have 3 of these Renown Unique tulips, which are this bright watermelon pink and just a gorgeous, tall, lovely tulip. And encouraging to know that they will survive even after losing them for multiple years in a row from the deer. I have a Centara, double Centara lilac. It's a proven winner's lilac, which is just starting to open up and bloom. Beautiful double blossoms, gorgeous scent, and one that I absolutely love. More irises and yarrow, more of the Dara. Drifted through here I have a patch of self-sown pincushion flower that should be Fata Morgana. I have delphinium and some more Oriental Poppies. Lots of the Souvenir de Andre catmint that is kind of flowing through here, as well as some anemones and lots of Love and a Mist that has self-sown, these little seedlings down on the ground that are coming through. I believe this is a Bliss Parfuma rose and some Coco Locos, a cream veranda rose, and this is a Viburnum Burkwoodii, which I planted the same year I planted the mock orange. And it has also been really sparse with blooms. I only have a couple this year, 3 on here. But this was something that came in as a bare root, and I think that it just needs another year or 2 to really establish, and then it should be up and gorgeous after that. So this should get quite large and should at someday be absolutely covered in fragrant blossoms. Now over here I have more Souvenir de Andre catmint coming in. I have more Sweet Rocket over here, and there's actually more larkspur that has drifted down this way, as well as lots of little babies of Shirley Poppies. Not as many as I had last year. Last year I had almost no bare ground because I had so many self-sown Shirley Poppies. I have nothing like that this year, but I do still have a few. So I should still see some blooms this year. And I did sow some seed with you guys a little while ago, a couple weeks ago, and I do have little babies coming up in a little drift over here as well. I have more self-sown foxgloves everywhere, and then a big patch of irises. Another project I want to do this year is to find some attractive way of disguising these septic lids. I hate looking at them. They're an eyesore for me in the garden, so I want to find a creative way to cover them up that will soften this border. Back behind here I have a Primrose Lilac And it's a lovely, the palest of yellow to white blooms. Very, very pretty. And then actually, here's a huge Shirley poppy that's coming up, and hopefully it will bloom true to being an amazing gray. But they're open pollinated, so you never know. But that already has blossoms on it, so that should be blooming soon. More irises, and then I have a trio of distant drums, roses here, underplanted with, again, more yarrow, catmint, and geranium, white lavender, coral charm peony, another vanilla strawberry hydrangea. It's one of my favorites. I have quite a few of them now. Queen of Elegance rose, more irises and delphiniums. I have the President Clematis up against the house that's coming up, and my beautiful geranium phaeum. This one I can't remember. It's not Raven. It's a different variety that is this lavender lilac color, and really, really pretty. I'll have to find that and pop that up on the screen. But I have two stainless steel roses here, and then in the back, this white lilac is from my husband's childhood garden. I got it as a little start. My mother-in-law gave it to me, dug it up from that garden, and that house isn't there anymore, and I've had it here in the garden. This is its 4th year, and it's finally bloomed for the first time. So I'm so excited to see that just get bigger and more beautiful every year. But it's so special to have a piece of his childhood garden here at our home for our children. This is a gorgeous Stand By Me Clematis, lady's mantle, white lavender, lady's mantle drifted all the way down and around this border. Sanguisorba drifted throughout the border, which will come up and have these beautiful little burgundy pops of color floating up in the air. I love the twinkle. I love anything that kind of drifts up and through roses and perennials and just adds a bit of glitter in the garden. I think that's what makes it magical. I do have a little patch of pincushion flower that I have started from seed that I planted the other day. Little babies in there. Some Japanese anemones, which are starting to spread themselves around this border, and I'm okay with that. More of these Shriner's irises. So actually these irises back here are from my mom's garden. They're a brown burgundy color, and I'm going to be dividing those and moving them this summer. And then I have 3 magical irises, or excuse me, candy coating irises from Shriner's, and more Souvenir de Andre Nepeta all through here, and a Nicole Carroll Miller rose in the back. This monster is Sally Holmes Climbing Rose, and I had fully intended to move her this spring because she's too big for her britches. She's too big for this spot, but it didn't happen, and she's covering up actually these 2 delphiniums here. I started from seed a couple years ago, and I'm gonna have to prop her up and train her on something just until I can move her, probably early next spring. Underneath her though are several more foxgloves underneath and behind her that have self-sown again and should be blooming this year. All of these were around last year, but really tiny. They always bloom in their 2nd year. And more white lavender, more sanguisorba, another coral charm peony, more of my sweet rocket that I started from seed, which is gonna be gorgeous this year and bloom. And it's underplanted with the lady's mantle and sweet woodruff, which I know sweet woodruff is pretty aggressive, but I think it's just beautiful, and I would be happy to see it cover as much understory ground as possible, because the more of this ground cover we have, the less pressure we have by weeds. And that is a garden goal for me this summer, is to add more ground cover to my garden everywhere to just up my ground cover game and really focus on it. And I still have loads of, I've got some Gara in here that's gonna be coming back up, some more Anemones that are small, coming back up, some Coco Loco roses in here that are small. This is a lilac which I got from Etsy when we moved in as a tiny little start. It still hasn't bloomed yet, and I don't remember the variety, but it has some burning on the tips of the leaves, and I'm not sure why. I don't know if that's just because we've had some late harsh frost, and this particular variety has been more susceptible to that cold weather. But I'm gonna watch it, and if it seems like it's diseased or struggling in some, I'm gonna pull it out. And I have more delphiniums back here. I have back here, if you can see, a butterscotch climbing rose, which I actually just got 2 more of in the mail, which I need to unbox, that are waiting for me in my garage. And the last thing that's in here that I should point out is that special hydrangea that I got from the Rosarium Garden Center in Spokane, and I transplanted next to it, and it needs a tower, but a Betty Corning Clematis, and it was so happy in the pot that it was in. It killed me a little bit to have to take her out, and I had actually 2 in a pot. They were both thriving, but I knew that they just couldn't stay in there long term, and I wanted to get them into the landscape. And I hope that they do well. I hope that they recover and have a good year this year, because they were looking so great in that container. So that's always so hard when you have to move things over. And actually, I'm going to be doing the same thing with this Paul Farge Clematis, putting it in the ground and taking it out of this big pot and letting it grow up, the cedar tree in the backyard. This is a long blooming, beautiful clematis that looks very similar to Sweet Autumn, but Sweet Autumn only blooms in the late summer, fall, and this will bloom all season long. So I won't focus too much on these pots because they've got my late winter, early spring hellebores and violas in them that I'm going to be taking out this week and planting at my summer displays. My sweet peas are coming up, but again, because of our really cold spring, my sweet peas are about 1/3 of the size that I would expect them to be at this time of the year. And I know that once we really start warming up, that they can put up to 1 foot of growth per week, as long as I'm fertilizing them really well. So I have not lost hope for them yet, but it just kind of goes to show that we can't predict the weather, and we don't always know what kind of season we are going to have. And it just makes me kind of gather up that information for next year, where maybe I will have some back stock of sweet peas that I've started in the house, just in case we have another really cold, crazy spring, because every spring that we've had here prior, they've just flourished. So it's just hard to say. But along the gravel behind the sweet pea pots and in the gravel next to it are more self-sown foxgloves, all in this little river of them, and they seem so happy, and I was gonna move them, but I'm curious to see them bloom where they are and have these foxglove in the middle of my gravel patio. And we don't have firm plans to put new gravel down in this area, which it desperately needs it. It looks awful, so having something beautiful blooming will hopefully distract from the need to put some more gravel down. I do have this beautiful bloodgood Japanese maple in this pot, and I love looking at it through the window from the house. It just softens the wood fence back here, and I love the color. This is a new project that's going to be coming up. I purchased this beautiful plant stand, or an etagere, I think is how you say it. This is from Pottery Barn and the Julia Berolzheimer collaboration collection, and I will link it down below, but I'm going to be potting this up with some beautiful things. I am debating on whether or not to move this inside my kitchen garden because I'm probably going to have some heirloom chrysanthemums as well as some very rare dahlias potted up here, and I really want to protect them from the deer at all costs. So I may move this into my kitchen garden so it's really, really safe. Typically, the deer aren't so bold as to come up this close to the house, but sometimes they are. It's hard to predict. So coming into the kitchen garden, which this year it's transitioned a little bit away from food production and leaning even more towards flowers than last year, which I think this will constantly be changing because we do have plans for hopefully next year to build a very large, true vegetable garden on the property. But that, because we're on a hillside, that's going to take a lot of grading and fill and soil amendments and fencing for the deer. So it's not just a simple project. Starting in the back of our kitchen garden, I have my out of control thornless blackberries. Black satin, I believe, is the variety. And I'm hoping to get a lot of fruit from them this year. So we planted these last year, and I planted 3 in this bed. Definitely too many blackberries, but they're overtaking their obelisks and look pretty happy. And I have my Eden climbing rose that I've just retrained along the fence, which looks gorgeous. It put up about a 14-foot cane that shot up straight up into the sky, and because I didn't tie it down, it got some pretty bad winter damage and I had to cut that back. But I'm training all the lateral canes so that we get maximum blooms this season. In this pot back here, I have a raspberry bush and mint in this barrel, a honeysuckle, the variety is Sensation from Proven Winners. And then I just got in the mail these 2 crabapple trees. I'm starting a crabapple tree collection. I want to have loads and loads of crabapple trees on the property. I'm keeping them in the kitchen garden until I have a firm setup to cage them from the deer. But the 2 varieties are Harvest Gold, which has beautiful, stunning gold colored fruits and beautiful gold fall foliage. And then this one is called Sugar Thyme. So this to my left is my blueberry bed, which I have not touched. Obviously it needs a lot of love and care. And I have all of these pansies and violas that have self-seeded themselves and I need to pull out. And I have Sahara Rudbeckia, which has survived, and it looks like I also have some of the phlox I had in here last year self-sow a little bit, which is exciting because I do want that to come back. These little violas have spread themselves along the gravel. Again, more interest to see on this rough gravel. And then this is exciting. This little tray are a tray of some beautiful heirloom chrysanthemum cuttings that I've potted up, as well as some specialty dahlias from Santa Cruz Dahlias. And I have about 5 more heirloom chrysanthemums inside that are waiting to be potted up. So this is my first year ever growing heirloom chrysanthemums, and I'm very excited to have these as a cut flower and to care for them. And I'm wondering, I want to keep my dahlia collection really small because they are so much work. So I'm hoping that chrysanthemums are my thing. I still love dahlias, but they are just a lot of work for me where I live. Here are some of the seedlings that I started this year. Foxgloves and Don Creek zinnias, cosmos, phlox, nasturtiums, mignonettes, China asters. I started dahlias from seed, Aztec zinnias, and I've already planted out a whole tray of pincushion flower and stalks. I also started, if you can see here, lots of ranunculus, which I was really late to get them into the ground, but they're just starting to come up. I've got them in lots of different places. But this is sort of my stash of plants, of roses, and I have about 8 more that aren't here. But I have my most favorite. I have 3 Everest crabapple trees back here, again, holding them in this area until I have a really solid plan for caging them from the deer. I have some more roses, some David Austin roses, some Ash Wednesday, Rare Rose, Stephen Rouleau, 2 Stephen Rouleaus in here. I have a rose from the Antique Rose Emporium. This one is a Cecil Brenner Climber. Rosemary, David Austin, First Crush, which is a roughly whipped cream, like pink whipped cream, pink white whipped cream. Cortez Rose. Some more David Austins back here. This is a Princess Charlene de Monaco, which I found locally for a screaming deal, so picked it up. And then I have some starts of Erigeron daisies and Gara, which I'm going to be using for a project in a upcoming video. Looking at my seedlings, and they all look like they need some water. I have a couple of climbing roses here, New Dawn, and this one is called John Davis. It's a Canadian rose. It doesn't really have a fragrance. I'm going to share a picture up on the screen of it in the Rosarium display garden. It is a stunning rose. It's not supposed to even blink at our cold winters, but it can just smother an arch and just be covered with these gorgeous, rich pink blooms. So I am waiting to plant this until I get an arch for this and some Clematis that I have to plant along with it. This bed is full of lots of beautiful tulips. I'm not sure about what variety this ended up being because everything got mixed up, but these are my one of my top favorites, the Santander. Again, the pink with the fringed edge, the blue throat, tall, just stunning. And then I planted more pink star in here for the purpose of cutting and using in the house. So I wasn't taking any away from the landscape. And that's kind of what I wanted, was to not feel so bad about cutting them and bringing them in the house. This bed was full of tulips, but they came up completely wrong varieties that I didn't order. So I pulled them out and I made that space available for Ranunculus, which I pre-sprouted and have put in the ground. Again, a little bit late, but we've had such a cold spring, so I didn't want them to get frozen. And they look like they're doing well. This is my first year ever growing Ranunculus, actually, so excited to see them. I do have some sweet peas coming up along the trellis. Again, those are about 1/3 the size of what I would be imagining that they would be this time of year, but we're just going with the weather. I have more of my seedlings that I started, so more Dawn Creek zinnias. I have more Cosmos and China asters, Nicotiana, Status, Strawflower, Coreopsis, Rudbeckia, a whole flat of that beautiful sweet rocket, which I'm going to show you my whole bed of that over there. And then if you remember the tomatoes we started together earlier in the year, these are them. They're looking great. I have some Dahlias here that I pre-sprouted. Again, I'm keeping my Dahlia collection small and manageable this year. I have broccoli and kale that we started together, all looking really good. So I'm excited to get these in the ground, or in pots primarily, and then whatever I don't use, I will be gifting to some family and friends. I have a couple more Eden climbing roses, which I picked up for Mother's Day. One is for me and one is for my mom, and I just haven't had a chance to give her hers. I have a Flavor Top nectarine, which I have yet to plant out into the garden. Again, waiting to have all of my design decisions finalized for my cages. But I have a beautiful Espalier apple tree here that I am going to be putting up a wire cable system along the house and training it along. I'm actually really surprised because our dog Prairie, when she was a puppy and kind of roaming in this garden when we first got her last year, chewed about half of the bark off at the base, and I thought that this tree wasn't going to make it, and it has. So we'll just see. It's got lots of blossom on it, so maybe we will see fruit this year. I'm not sure, but I'm hopeful because she looks pretty good. And she's underplanted with a new to me variety of tulip called Ridgedale, so I'm excited to see what she looks like in bloom. This is my strawberry bed. Mixed varieties in here. I have Proven Winners, Buried Treasure, tomatoes. I have some more common varieties like Ozark, and I've got some tags throughout here, but a mixed bag of strawberries. I've let them send out runners and drop down on the ground, and I'm getting strawberry plants in the ground, but I don't really mind at this stage, again, because we are not putting down gravel this year. I've also let all of my chamomile spread along the gravel, and you might be wondering, like, what is this weed everywhere? But it's chamomile, and it's a pollinator magnet. It's beautiful when it's in bloom and looks soft and airy, and I'm just kind of letting it be this year and letting the pollinators enjoy it. We'll probably cut some and make some homemade chamomile tea, which we've done in the past, and just make the most of it while it's beautiful, and then pull it out when it's done. This bed is loaded with a lot of beautiful pink tulips, albeit half of them I didn't order, were mislabeled. I believe this variety is Columbus. It looks like we've got some that maybe have that flaming, I can't remember the name of it right now, but it's basically a disease with tulips that gives these flaming, streaking petals, and I will need to be taking those out. But I've also got some silver parrot, some Santander. It looks like I have some more James Last in here that will be coming up. A lone tulip, which I think it's like Silver Cloud or something like that. But I wanted to try all these parrot tulips, and I'm really liking them this year. I have more sweet peas along the side of the trellis, as well as a Betty Corning Clematis. And then these, I think these are salmon parrot. They were supposed to be salmon parrot, but I'm not exactly sure what they ended up being because everything was so mixed up. But the other varieties in here should be Renowned Unique, and maybe one other, maybe Copper Image. So these have obviously not bloomed yet, so we'll have to wait and see what they end up being. Back here I have I just planted them out, 2 Ash Wednesday climbing roses along the fence. I wanted to plant them somewhere where they would be protected. They did get hit really hard by aphids, and I've been spraying them really hard with water to kill off any aphids, and it looks like they're clean right now, but I did defoliate them everywhere that they had had a lot of aphid damage, so they're looking a little bit worse for wear. But I have learned that this is a tough variety of rose, because when I first got them, our puppy had chomped them down to the base, and they have regrown. And again, though they did get a little wind damage in the storm and some aphid damage, but I think I'm just going to keep feeding them and watering them. This is my next project, is to clean up all around this fence line, remove all this grass, and I think they'll be happy, hopefully like the Eden Rose has been happy. This bed is filled with Sweet Rocket, which I want to use for cutting. I planted it here initially because I wanted it so badly, and I was concerned that the deer would eat it, but I've since found out that it's pretty deer resistant, so I'm going to be planting that whole tray I started out in my large new no-dig border, which will hopefully spread happily all around. I also have a thornless boysenberry in here climbing up the arch, and actually I didn't point out on the opposite side of the arch is a Clematis, Montana Rubens, that is growing up it as well. And I wanted to show you these sweet rocket, along with the chamomile, are sowing themselves in the gravel. So I have lots of little baby sweet rocket starts down here in the gravel along with the chamomile and the violas. And I'm just letting them be until we lay down new gravel. So they're actually sowing themselves everywhere, which I'm shocked at the amount of things like the tomatoes and chamomile and everything that has sowed itself into this gravel, because there's landscape fabric underneath it. And I think this is where we're going to end off for this evening. I hope you really enjoyed this. There will be another garden tour coming very soon, going over our terrace in the backyard and our new garden space down there, which is slowly evolving, and there's been some pretty developments along the hillside with our little woodland plantings, and I hope this inspires you to go outside and enjoy your space. Happy gardening. I'll see you next time.